Holy Ghost just dropped something on me.
Okay.
A lot of times when you're feeling a certain kind of way, because of my family pattern of being the oldest of a divorced couple and the oldest sibling in that family system, I felt responsible for the emotional atmosphere in my family of origin.
Okay.
And as a child, I was triggered when I would hear my mother crying, and I felt responsible to make her feel better. You following me?
Okay.
So when you, my wife, are in an emotional space where I know you're not feeling good or feeling your best, I get triggered sometimes and I want to get in there and fix it. When sometimes what you need is just space to be able to process what you're going through. So as a husband, what I can do is say, sweetheart, I noticed that you're not really moving like you normally move and you seem a little sad or something. If there's anything you need from me, I'm here for you. But just know that instead of like, what's wrong with you? You know, da da da. No, come on, talk to me. I've learned how to be a non-anxious presence. Everybody say non-anxious presence. You got to learn how to be a non-anxious presence in the relationship. And so, how do you do that? You practice pausing. You know, if you wake up and you seem like your spouse is moving a little bit different, just pause. It ain't always about you.
Right.
It's not always, what did I do? Is she mad at me? Is he mad at me? His nose twitch, his eyes, his brow is frowned up. Is he mad at me? No, no, no. It could just be that your spouse is thinking about something. And I think just pausing for a moment and not taking that personal.
And that's really good of not taking it personal, because I think a lot of times in relationships we do take the other person's shift of energy personal when it actually has nothing to do with us at all. And one thing that you really are good at is that sometimes you'll just come up to me if I'm, more quiet or more withdrawn, then you'll just give me a hug. And that helps to bring my defenses down, as especially if I'm upset about something that is going on in the house.
Yeah. And everything doesn't deserve a
No,
response.
no.
Sometimes you just need to pause and breathe. You know, there's been times we've been driving in the car and I may say something and I could feel that you misconstrue what I said and you get a little curt or short. And instead of coming right back with another response, I've learned to just and take a deep breath and let it go and not even respond. And then a few minutes later, we're off to the next subject. But if I were to keep going on, what you mean by that? It's like something simple will turn into
Right.
a whole nother thing simply because I felt I need to respond to that energy when I don't have to.
And what is saying Bowen
Bowen.
saying that anxiety travels through like a current.
Yeah. And it's
So
like a loop.
it just keeps going, and you may get in a loop, and what you were meant to be talking about now it's lost because now it just becomes too much.
You know, in Philippians 4:7, it says, be anxious for nothing, but what? Pray about everything. And so sometimes, you have to just say a little prayer. When you're taking a deep breath and you want to respond to your spouse, take a deep breath and just say a prayer. And then when you calm down, you regulate yourself, then you can speak on it. Watch this. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. It's all about the tone. It's all about how you say what you say. And if you give a gentle answer, sweetheart, baby, that does a lot better than, what you mean? What you mean? It's all about how you say it. So let's talk for a moment. Is there a hot moment where one of you chose regulation over reaction and it changed that outcome? I want y'all to think about that as a couple. But baby, can you think of a hot moment where one of us chose regulation over reaction and it changed the outcome?
One that immediately comes to mind is when before I lost my dad, and he was sick, and we live in different states. My siblings and I, we all majority live in different states. And our mom called and was like, Dad wants y'all here. now. And so that just put me all in an uproar. I'm getting ready to get in my car to drive,
How far?
7 hours away, and it was already late at night, and I'm upset, and it that wouldn't have been a good idea of driving that far, upset, and it just made no sense. And so you calmed me down. You were like, babe, I know you want to get there right now, but I need you to get there safe. You can fly out in the morning. And so you held me while I expressed my sadness for what was going on, and so that you helped to regulate that situation.
Yeah. And sometimes we need that because that lizard brain takes over, and we become impulsive. Because we get stuck in fight or flight or freeze. But when you're regulated emotionally and somebody comes in and helps you to become emotionally regulated, you can calm down and think more rationally. When you're anxious, you can't make a clear cut decision.
No.
You're acting out of your emotions, and it's so good for that. Listen, the next thing we want to talk about is unwholesome threesomes. What?
What?
Unholy threesomes. Triangulation is what Dr. Murray Bowen talks about, triangulation. And when stress rises, we pull a third thing or a person, child, work, ministry, the phone, church member. Sometimes when stress rises, we tend to pull in a third party to help us to deal with the dysregulation. You got to make a covenant, a two-person process that you don't vent to outsiders instead of talking to your spouse.
Oh, that takes maturity, because if you go to outsiders or go to family and you're having a little riff with your spouse during one night, and you vent to a sister or a sister friend, and then you and your spouse, you guys make up, your sister friend is still looking at you sideways, and she's angry at him. He doesn't know she's angry, and then you probably forgotten all that you have said to your friend. And so then that becomes, I can see where that is an unholy triangulation.
What's the danger, babe, of going to work and talking to somebody of the opposite sex about all that's going wrong in your marriage?
Oh, so many red flags. One, you're talking to an opposite sex about what's going on with your marriage, and if that person is also having issues at home, then you become kind of work wife, husband, work husband, where y'all just talk to each other about
and
what's
before
wrong.
you know it,
Right.
there's emotional transference, and the person you become so comfortable talking to about all your problems, he understands me, don't he? And the next thing you know, y'all cuddle up somewhere because you have transferred your love for that person who became a good listener. Right?
And one, that person isn't a person that you've made, this before God, this covenant with God, and knows all of your bad habits, your good habits, how you wake up in the morning, what your routine is. That person doesn't really know you. He or she only knows your 9 to 5 self.
And some people who are good predators know how to listen real good because they have an agenda at the end, and that is to get your spouse in the bed. So you got to make sure that you don't allow a third person to come in and get the ear or heart of your spouse. Let me ask you this. How does a child become the third person in a family system?
Well, the child, I can assume, could possibly become the third person in the system when you're constantly dealing with the child as opposed to spending time with your spouse, where you're always doing things. Of course, we want you to take care of your children, but when you're neglecting your spouse and putting all of the energy into your child or children.
That's good.
Or even I can see where the child gets older and you make this child more of a surrogate per se spouse and put all your love and affection to the child as opposed to giving it to your
That's
spouse.
so good. And another thing that came to mind while you were talking is that this tendency of us to be helicopter moms and dads. When you have a child who is acting out in the family system, sometimes you put so much attention on trying to get that child right, that the marriage gets neglected or the spouse gets neglected because you're putting so much energy trying to get this child together. And what Bowen would say is to be non-anxious with that child and to set some healthy boundaries and some consequences for when the child breaks the boundaries. You don't get all upset. Didn't I tell you to clean your... You know what? I'm not hollering at you. I'm not going to keep fussing at you. If you don't clean your room, I'm going to take your phone. You're not gonna be able to go to the dance. I'm gonna take your keys, and that's that. And 9 times out of 10, instead of doing all that hollering, jumping, wasting all that energy, once the consequences are set in, then the child will self-regulate instead of you expending all the energy. But many times in a relationship, we allow third parties to come in. It's called triangulation. Also, your job can be the third party, right? You, instead of focusing on healing the relationship, you spend more time at work or more time in ministry. And that begins to absorb all of your time to the point where the relationship gets worse and worse and worse because you're not cutting off that third party.
Or it could be a season that a job or a child needs that extra attention. But again, openly communicating with your spouse and y'all tackle it together, you're a unit, as opposed to one person just etching away at whatever's going on. Babe, this is such and such season and I've got to work longer hours. And you readjust. And so when you're readjusting and you're communicating with your spouse, then you can come up with those healthy boundaries and different ways of dealing with things together, as opposed to the other spouse feeling that they're being left out.
Yeah. Mark 10:9 says, what God has joined together, let no man separate. No man or woman or job. Whenever there's a third entity that's threatening to pull apart what God joined together, that has become unhealthy. And that could be a child, that could be another person of the opposite sex, it could be a job. But whatever it is, both of you have to be like, you know what? I think it's time for us to cut this third thing off. And not cut, you can't cut off a child, but you can change how you respond to that child. You cannot necessarily quit a job, but you might have to start putting some regulations in place. For example, at one point I was asking you about traveling and speaking and getting involved in politics, and I've had a meeting and you guys were like, you're already gone so much. And so we started communicating how much is healthy and how much is unhealthy. So all those things are necessary. So what are some practical guardrails we could use to avoid unhealthy triangles? What do you think? What are some healthy guardrails we can put in place to avoid those unhealthy triangles?
Well, one, when you feel like that you are not being heard, where you feel like you may want to go vent to someone outside of your marriage, just go and talk to your husband. Or again, write a letter or a text message to your spouse and said, hey, is there a good time for us to talk? I know I'm feeling a little distance in our relationship. Can we talk? And just setting up those times where it will be a good time for you both to talk.
And if you're going to have opposite sex friends, those friends must be friends with your spouse. And typically it's better when the opposite sex is a friend couple group, so that everybody knows that we have parameters around what is healthy, what is holy, and there's no secrets, there's no split offs, because you got to put those healthy boundaries in place. After all, it was a third party, Satan, that came into the garden and tempted Eve into thinking she was missing out on something. And a third party that is unhealthy will always come into your present relationship to make you think that you're missing out on something, when in actuality, everything you need is already in your garden, and it's up to you to restore Eden and get that third party out and say, devil, you are a lie, and crush that devil on his head before he can plant seeds into the spouse's mind. And so we got to put up some healthy guardrails. I hope that so far this has helped you in what it takes to be a couple that has a healthy purpose, a healthy relationship. What do you do on purpose to have a healthy relationship? Let's just recap it. Number one, we got to make sure that we differentiate, that we have self-differentiation. You got to know what interests you. You got to build up your character, your purpose. Are you working out? Are you going to a counselor? Do you know what you want in the relationship? Because a healthy relationship is two people who are whole. What's the second one?
The second one is that you've got to learn to manage your anxiety. And when we're living in, in the relationship and outside of the relationship, there's so much that we could be anxious for, but knowing that you have your spouse to lean on and for you guys to discuss what's going on and to come up with healthy ways to remedy the situation.
And avoid unhealthy triangles.
Yes.
The two should become one flesh. Do not allow a third party to come and separate what God has brought together. That could be a child. It could be a friend, a coworker. It could be your work itself. You got to make sure that you protect your relationship. So we're going to pause right there because I feel like these three things that y'all can go and marinate on and talk about as a couple, and ask each other, do we have a healthy sense of self? Or are we fused? Or are we too distant? We need a healthy balance of self. Are we, watch this, managing our anxiety, or are we in a constant loop of anxiety that we have not cut off? Somebody's got to be the calm one. Somebody's got to be like, pause. And thirdly, we got to make sure we got some healthy guardrails to avoid unhealthy triangulation. So those are just three things. We're going to come back next week and give you three more things on how you can make sure your marriage is healthy. Listen, if you need some extra help, we got you. We are board certified sex counselors, and we are going to help you with all things intimacy, communication, conflict resolution. If you need a special counseling session, reach out to us. We got you. If you want to be a part of our Eden Circle community, how do they do that?
If you want to be a part of Eden Circle, go to theedencircle.com.
Yeah, and register. Go subscribe.
And subscribe.
And then, of course, if you haven't subscribed already to our podcast, do that tonight. Subscribe and share. Leave a comment, y'all. Talk to us. We need to get some feedback on how we're doing. We want to make sure we're scratching you where you're itching and reaching you where you need the help the most. So thank you for being on tonight. We look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you so much for being in Eden, where we want you to be, naked and without shame. Until next time, be blessed.